For 27 fights, the Seoul Knight whispered a single name as law: Kim Jun, the Dragon of Dongdaemun. His underground ring was a locked kingdom, his winning streak a myth you paid to witness. Until the 42-second mark of Fight 28, when a woman he'd never seen before shattered his rib with a kick she wasn't supposed to know. That woman was Isla Vance, an outsider with no record, no crew, and a style of martial arts that didn't belong in any Seoul gym. And Kim Jun wasn't just a fighter. He was a crown prince of the Jumhopa, a syndicate that treated this cellar as its treasury. So why did he bet $200,000 on himself losing? To understand that bet, you have to understand the Dragon's Cage. The fight club beneath the abandoned textile mill in Dongdaemun wasn't sport. It was a perfectly engineered ecosystem. Kim Jun, the 34-year-old heir apparent to the Jumhopa's operations in central Seoul, designed it himself. Every other Saturday night, 70 select guests, businessmen with too much won, minor celebrities craving real danger, and syndicate associates from Busan to Incheon paid $10,000 just to walk down the crumbling staircase. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the metallic scent of blood not fully scrubbed from the concrete. In the center, a 20-foot circle of poured rubber matting, surrounded by a single rope. No gloves, no rounds. Just two fighters and one rule: you fought until you couldn't answer 10 count. Jun had ruled that circle for 4 years, 27 consecutive wins. He wasn't just the champion, he was the house. The Jumhopa took a 20% vig on every private wager placed in that room, a river of untraceable cash that flowed straight into the syndicate's pockets. Jun's unbeaten streak was the foundation of the entire operation. It was the attraction, the proof of invincibility that kept the high rollers coming back. To bet against him was considered financial suicide or a profound insult. The Dragon was getting tired. The syndicate life was a birthright he never chose. His father, Kim Seok-jung, was a founding member of the Jumhopa, a man who built his legacy on fear and broken kneecaps. Jun was raised with two paths: become a lawyer to clean the money or become a fighter to cement the myth. He chose the latter, mastering Hapkido and Kyokushin karate not out of passion, but out of a desperate need to control something, even if it was just a square of mat in a basement. The money, the respect, the fear, it was all a gilded cage, and the walls were closing in. The syndicate elders, including his own father, had begun pressuring him to take a more managerial role, to marry the daughter of a Busan shipping magnate to merge territories. The Fight Club, his one place of agency, was to be handed off to a brutish enforcer named Kang Di. Jun saw his future: a desk, a wedding photo, a lifetime of giving orders that stained his soul. The only way out was a catastrophic public failure, a loss so spectacular, so humiliating, that he would be deemed unfit to lead but would survive it. He would be stripped of his crown but freed from his throne. For months he scouted for the right weapon. It couldn't be a known contender from another syndicate that would spark a war. It couldn't be a fluke. It had to be an outsider, a complete unknown who could dismantle him so utterly that no one could question the result. He found her in a threadbare mixed martial arts gym in Itaewon, teaching self-defense classes to expatriates. Isla Vance was 28, a tempest of controlled motion with a past that didn't translate on paper. She arrived in Seoul 18 months prior from London, with a degree in physiotherapy, a visa for sports rehabilitation, and a silence about her years between 16 and 22 that even immigration couldn't crack. She was a ghost in the city's combat scene, training alone at dawn in public parks, her style a fluid, unpredictable hybrid. She had learned capoeira from her Jamaican grandfather in Brixton and hard-edged Krav Maga from a former IDF soldier who ran a clinic in her neighborhood. The result was neither dance nor pure brutality, but something in between, a deceptive, circular fighting language that used momentum as a blade. She took the job at the gym to pay rent, but her real money came from private, discreet sparring sessions with wealthy clients who wanted to learn street-effective defense. One of those clients was a mid-level Jumhopa accountant with a paranoid streak who mentioned the incredible skill of his teacher to his boss, Kang Di. The enforcer came to observe, disguised as a potential student. He saw a woman who moved like water around her opponents, who could fell a 200-pound man with a sweep that looked like a stumble. He reported back not as a threat, but as a novelty, a potential sideshow for the club. Jun overheard. He went to see for himself. He watched her for an hour from the back of the gym. She was correcting a student's posture, her voice calm, her hands precise. But June didn't see a teacher, he saw a key. Her technique was alien to the Korean fighting circuits. It had no pride, no ceremony. It was pure, efficient problem-solving. It was the perfect tool to break a myth. He approached her after class with a proposition wrapped in a lie. He was an independent fight promoter, he said. There was an underground exhibition, full contact, a single match. The purse was $50,000. No questions asked, win or lose. Isla hesitated. The money was a lifeline. Her mother's medical bills in London were a mounting tsunami. But the world of underground fighting was a swamp she'd avoided her whole life. June played his final card. He told her his fighter was a bully, a man who believed women didn't belong in the ring. He was arrogant, predictable, and he deserved to be humbled. He showed her a heavily edited clip of himself fighting, making his style seem rigid and arrogant. It was a masterful manipulation. He wasn't just offering her money, he was offering her a cause. The night of the fight, the atmosphere was electric with a cruel curiosity. When Isla walked into the cellar, a hush fell over the crowd. She was a scandal in a black tank top and hand wraps. Whispers slithered through the smoke. Is this a joke? June's finally gone soft. Kangdi sneered from the sidelines, already counting the vig from the lopsided bets. June stood across from her, his expression the usual mask of cold dominance, but his heart was a drum counting down to his own ruin. The bet had been placed through 3 shell accounts, $200,000 on the unknown female fighter to win by knockout. It was a bet that would bankrupt his personal holdings if he won and set him free if he lost. The fight began with the clang of a wrench on a steel pipe. For the first 30 seconds, June played his part, pressing forward with aggressive strikes meant to look powerful but leave openings. Isla flowed around them, reading him like a strange text. And then she saw it, a micro-hesitation in his advance, a window he was holding open just a fraction too long. She didn't question her luck. She pivoted on her left foot, her body coiling like a spring, and unleashed a spinning heel kick that connected not with his head, but with a precise, brutal point just below his right pectoral. There was a sound like a green branch snapping. June's world dissolved into white, searing pain. He crumpled, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The count began. He stared at the stained concrete, a smile touching his bloodied lips as the number 10 echoed. The dragon had fallen. The syndicate's treasury was breached, and as the crowd erupted in chaos and Kangdi's face purpled with rage, Isla Vance stood in the center, her chest heaving, unaware she hadn't just won a fight. She had become the ultimate loose end in a game where loose ends were cut away. The money would be in her account by morning, but by dawn, a new offer would arrive at her door, a direct summons from the very syndicate she'd just accidentally bankrupted. They wouldn't ask for their money back. They asked for her. The summons wasn't a note. It was 2 men in impeccably tailored suits at her studio apartment door at 6 a.m., their politeness more threatening than any weapon. "Mr. Kim requests your presence for breakfast," they said. It was not a request. Isla, still wearing the clothes from the fight, the adrenaline replaced by a deep, cold dread, went with them. She was driven not to headquarters, but to secluded Hanok, a traditional house nestled in the hills of Bukhansan, its beauty serene and disarming. Inside, at a low wooden table, sat Kim June, his right side heavily strapped, movement stiff with pain. And beside him, an older man whose presence filled the room without uttering a word, Kim Seok-jung, June's father. The patriarch of the Jumho-pa didn't look like a monster. He looked like a retired professor with gentle eyes that missed nothing. He poured tea for her himself. "We owe you an apology, Miss Vance," Seok-jung began, his voice a soft rasp. "My son's theatricality has caused you significant trouble. The $200,000 bet he placed against himself was, to put it mildly, a breach of our internal protocols. It has created a liquidity problem." Isla's mind raced. They knew about the bet. They knew everything. She prepared for the demand, for the threat to return the money, but it didn't come. Instead, Seok-jung slid a tablet across the table. On it was a live feed of a hospital room in London. Her mother, asleep, a monitor beeping softly beside her. The air left Isla's lungs. "We have taken the liberty of transferring her to a more suitable facility," Seok-jung continued. "All expenses, past and future, are settled. Consider it compensation for the deception." June sat silently, his gaze fixed on the tabletop, a prisoner in his own father's play. The old man's strategy was unveiled not with a hammer, but with a surgeon's scalpel. The Jumho had just lost its main attraction. Its reputation for invincibility was cracked. The high rollers would flee, taking their gambling revenue with them. But what if Seokjung proposed? The story was even better. What if the dragon wasn't slain by a fluke, but was bested by a true master? A master whom he then had the wisdom to bring into the fold. The loss could be spun not as weakness, but as strategic evolution. Isla Vance would become the new face of the Fight Club, the first female champion of the Dongdaemun Ring, the ultimate symbol of the syndicate's modernity and strength. She would fight for them. She would train their enforcers. She would become an asset. In return, her mother would receive world-class care, and Isla would receive a percentage of the club's revived profits that would make the $50,000 purse look like pocket change. Refusal was not presented as an option. It was simply absent from the conversation. Isla was trapped. The money for her mother was a chain of pure gold. To walk away meant abandoning her mother to the crushing debt. To say yes meant selling her soul to a criminal empire. She looked at June, searching for some sign, some hint of the man who bet on his own downfall. He finally met her eyes. His were hollow, resigned. He had tried to burn his cage down, and his father had simply used the flames to forge a new, larger one for both of them. Isla said the only word she could: yes. Her life was upended within hours. She was moved from her studio into a secured, luxurious apartment in Gangnam, a gilded cage with a view. Her phone was replaced. Her schedule was dictated by a severe woman named Mrs. Choi, who was her handler, stylist, and shadow combined. The first order of business was her debut, not as a challenger, but as the Jumho newly crowned champion. The story was fed to a few carefully curated gossip outlets. Kim June, the legendary dragon, had discovered a once-in-a-generation talent during a training trip abroad. He had brought her to Seoul to hone her skills, and in a private exhibition, she had proven herself so formidable he conceded defeat, passing the torch to a new era. It was a narrative of respect and succession, sanitized for consumption. The next fight night was announced. The mystery woman who broke the streak would defend her new title against Kang Di, June's former enforcer, a man who saw her not as a champion, but as a stain to be erased. The weeks of preparation were a surreal hell. Isla's training was moved to a private gym in the basement of the Hanok. Her trainer, assigned by Seokjung, was June himself. It was a cruel piece of psychological theater. For 8 hours a day, they were locked in that room together. The silence between them was a living thing, thick with betrayal and unspoken collusion. He would demonstrate a combination, his body moving with fluid grace despite his injury. She would mirror it, her execution sharper, faster. They did not speak of the bet. They did not speak of his father. They spoke only of technique, of footwork, of Kang Di's tell, a slight drop of his left shoulder before a powerful hook. But in the spaces between words, a different communication happened. She saw the profound fatigue in him, the shame of having dragged her into his world. He saw not just a fighter in her, but the weight she carried, the fear for her mother, the desperation that matched his own. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling sparring session where they had both ended up on the mats, gasping, June spoke to the ceiling. "I didn't know about the hospital. I didn't know he would go that far." Isla replied, her voice flat. "Does it matter?" He turned his head to look at her. "Yes, it's the only thing that matters." That was the crack. The first acknowledgement that they were not just prisoner and jailer, but fellow captives. He began to tell her fragments of his life. The expectations that felt like a burial shroud. The engagement to the Busan daughter, a woman he had met twice. The constant, dull pressure of being a symbol rather than a person. Isla, in turn, shared slivers of her own silence. Her grandfather, the capoeira master who taught her that movement was a language. The years in London where she fought in truly underground, no-rules bouts to pay for her education. A secret life that left no official record but plenty of scars. They were master and student, victim and accomplice, and slowly, against all reason, they became allies. Meanwhile, Kang Di was preparing for war. He saw Isla's placement as a personal insult and a weakening of the syndicate's masculine core. He began rallying a faction within the Jumho, older members who viewed Seokjung's modernizing gambit as dangerous sentimentality. The fight was no longer just about a title. It was a proxy war for the soul of the organization. The tension bled into every corner of Isla's new life. Mrs. Choi's instructions became more paranoid. Her food was tasted first. Routes to the gym were changed daily. She was a prized weapon, and also the most likely target. The night of the fight arrived. The atmosphere in the mill basement was poisonously different. The curiosity had curdled into partisan rage. Half the crowd, loyal to Kang Di or his traditionalist faction, booed when Isla entered. The other half, those who respected June or were simply intrigued by the spectacle, roared. Kang Di entered like a bull, pounding his own chest, his eyes locked on her with naked hatred. June, suited and standing in his father's shadow at ringside, gave her a single, almost imperceptible nod. The fight was not like the first. Kang Di was not a technically brilliant fighter, but he was a force of pure, brutal physics. He was bigger, stronger, and fueled by a lifetime of resentment. He waded forward, eating her strikes, his sole aim to clinch with her and use his weight to break her. Isla was a darting bird, using her footwork to stay away, landing stinging blows that angered him but didn't slow him. For 3 minutes, it was a battle of philosophies. Then he cornered her. He grabbed her by the neck of her tank top and slammed her against the concrete post that held up the rope. The crowd screamed. He drew his fist back for a crushing blow to her face. And in that suspended second, Isla did something she hadn't practiced, something born of the London Bacallis, not the dojo. She went limp, sliding down the post just as his punch sailed over her head and connected with the concrete. There was a sickening crunch of knuckles. Kang Di howled. And Isla, from her crouch, drove the heel of her palm straight up into his solar plexus. He folded, gagging. She spun, whipping her elbow across his jaw. He dropped like a felled tree. The silence was absolute, then chaos. Kang Di's faction surged forward. June was in the ring in an instant, putting himself between Isla and the advancing men, his good arm raised, his voice cutting through the noise with an authority that stilled them. The fight is over. She is the champion. This is Jumho law. His father watched from the shadows, a small, satisfied smile on his face. The crisis had been averted. His new champion had proven herself in blood. His son had publicly endorsed her. The narrative was cemented. But in the car ride back, Isla saw the cost. June's knuckles were white where he gripped the seat. The factional split was now an open wound, and Kang Di, humiliated twice over, would not forget. Back at the Hanok, Seok Jung was triumphant. He presented Isla with a contract, making her position official. A salary, benefits, a 5-year term. As she held the pen, she looked at June. He gave a tiny, almost desperate shake of his head. It was the final confirmation she needed. Signing this was a life sentence. It was adopting the cage. She put the pen down. "I need 24 hours to consider the terms," she said, her voice steady. Seok Jung's smile didn't fade, but it cooled. "Of course," he said, "but understand, the offer for your mother's care is contingent on our continued partnership." The threat was now explicit. That night, for the first time, June came to her apartment. Not as a trainer, not as a syndicate prince. He came as a man out of options. "We have to run," he said. "Tonight, my father will never let you go. And if you stay," his voice broke, "I cannot watch him own you too." He had a plan, or the shreds of one. He had access to offshore accounts his father didn't fully monitor, the remnants of his fight winnings, enough for 2 passports and a flight to anywhere. He could get them out of the country, but there was a condition, a final test. His father was hosting a high-stakes poker game the following evening at the Hanok. The buy-in was $1 million. It was where the Jumho top brass laundered money and forged alliances. Every member would be there, their security relaxed, distracted. June knew the safe in his father's study would be open, holding not just cash, but a ledger, a physical record of every illegal bet, every payoff, every corrupt official on the payroll. It was the empire's heart. If they took it, they wouldn't just be running. They would have a weapon. They could bargain for their freedom, for her mother's safety. It was a suicide mission, but it was the only play left. Isla looked at him, at the raw hope and terror in his eyes. This was the man who had engineered her destruction to save himself and was now offering to burn his entire world down to save her. She had one question. Why? Not why the plan, but why her? Why now? June reached out, his hand hovering near her face, not touching, "Because you were the first real thing to walk into that cellar in years. And when you knocked me down, it was the first time I'd felt clean in a decade." They had less than 24 hours to plan a theft that would be seen as an act of war. The poker game was a fortress of habit. It began at 9 p.m. in the main hall of the Hanok, a ritual so entrenched that security protocols became relaxed, inward-facing. The guards knew every guest. June's role was to be present, to play a few hands, to be the dutiful son. Isla's role was to be invisible. Using her knowledge of the staff rotations, gleaned from weeks of observation, she would slip into the private East Wing during the dessert service when the kitchen was at its busiest. June had given her the code to his father's study door, a 6-digit number based on his own birthday, a bitter irony he noted with a hollow laugh. The safe behind the hanging scroll was a classic mechanical model. The combination was the date the Jumho was founded. June whispered it to her like a curse. April 19th, 1978. The night arrived, thick with unseasonable fog that cloaked the mountain. Isla dressed in dark, soft clothing, her heart a trapped bird against her ribs. From her apartment window, she watched the black sedans slither up the drive. Powerful men in overcoats, laughing. She met June's gaze across the crowded entrance hall for a fleeting second. His eyes were the still surface of a deep, dangerous lake. Go, they seemed to say. Now. The first part went with a terrifying smoothness. While the clink of chips and low murmurs of bluffing filled the main hall, Isla became a shadow in the servants' corridor. She knew the blind spot where the camera's sweep hesitated for 3 full seconds. She knew the guard, Young Min, who would be at the East Wing door, and that he had a weakness for the walnut cookies Mrs. Choi kept in the pantry. A freshly baked plate, left accidentally on a side table, did its work. She passed the unmanned door, her breath shallow. The study was dark, smelling of old paper and sandalwood. The scroll depicting a tiger in a bamboo grove felt heavy as she moved it aside. The safe was there, cold and green. Her hands, steady in the ring, trembled as she dialed the numbers. 419198. A soft, solid clunk. The handle turned. Inside was more than money. Bundles of $1 yen and a single thick leather-bound ledger. She grabbed it. As she did, a small framed photograph tucked behind the cash bundles fell to the carpet. It was a picture of a much younger Kim Seok-jung standing arm in arm with another man in front of a shipyard. The other man was Caucasian, with a familiar sharp jawline and light eyes. Isla's blood went cold. She knew that face. It was Richard Vance, her father. A man who had walked out on her and her mother when Isla was 5. A man whose name was spoken in her house only as a synonym for betrayal. What was his picture doing in the heart of the Jumho-pa's secrets? There was no time. She shoved the photo into the ledger and closed the safe. Exiting was harder. The cookie ploy had been discovered. Young Min was back at his post, chagrined and alert. Isla had to use the alternative route, a narrow maintenance crawl space that ran above the hallway, accessed through a ceiling panel in a linen closet. She was halfway through the dusty, cramped darkness when she heard voices below, Kang Di and one of his lieutenants. They weren't in the game. They were making a perimeter check, and they'd stopped directly beneath her. Money isn't the point, Kang Di was saying, his voice a low growl. The old man is losing his grip, letting a woman fight, letting his spoiled brat call the shots. After tonight, after the game, we make our move. The lieutenant murmured agreement. Isla held her breath, a beam of dust motes dancing in the sliver of light from a vent beside her. Then her phone, which she had foolishly left on silent but not powered off, vibrated in her pocket. The sound was a monstrous buzz in the quiet crawl space. The conversation below stopped dead. Who's there? Kang Di barked. Isla froze. Then she did the only thing she could think of. She let the phone slip from her fingers. It clattered down through the vent, landing with a thud on the hallway floor below. A rat, you idiot, the lieutenant said, nervous. Probably knocked a tool loose. Kang Di wasn't convinced. Check the panel. Isla scrambled forward, moving faster now, the ledger scraping against the narrow walls. She heard the closet door open below. She reached the end of the crawl space and kicked out the mesh covering, dropping into a janitor's sink room just as she heard Kang Di's shout of discovery from the closet behind her. She ran, not to the exit, but deeper into the house, toward the one place she might find momentary shelter, June's private rooms. She burst through the door, locking it behind her. The room was stark, minimally decorated. She had minutes at most. She grabbed June's laptop from his desk, hooked up her phone, and frantically uploaded photos of the ledger's key pages to a cloud storage account, emailing the link to a dormant address she used for banking. As she did, she flipped to the page referenced by her father's photo. It was a shipping manifest from 23 years ago, a vessel called the Morning Star *, listed cargo, textiles. Handwritten in the margin in her father's distinct scrawl was a single word, Birmingham *, and a sum of money that made her dizzy. It was a delivery fee. Her father hadn't just known Kim Seok-jung. He had worked for him. He had been a smuggler. His abandonment hadn't been a simple affair. He had been running from this world, and he'd left them behind as loose ends. The door shuddered under a heavy kick. Kang Dee's voice roared through the wood. "Open it." Isla slammed the laptop shut, shoved the physical ledger under June's bed, and spun to face the door as it splintered open. Kang Dee filled the doorway, his face a mask of triumphant fury. Behind him, two of his men. "I knew it," he sneered. "The little bird thinks she can steal from the nest. Where is June? Is he part of this pathetic rebellion?" Before she could answer, June's voice cut through from the hallway, calm and dripping with authority. "Step away from my door, Kang Dee." The enforcer turned, a smirk on his face. "The prodigal son, come to protect your pet." The poker game had evidently broken up. Seok Jung stood behind June, his gentle eyes now chips of flint, taking in the scene, the broken door, Isla in June's room, the tension crackling in the air. "Explain," he said, the single word colder than the mountain fog. Kang Dee jabbed a finger at Isla. She was in the crawl space. She'd stolen something, searching for blackmail material, no doubt. June stepped forward, putting himself between Isla and the others. "I asked her to meet me here, father, after the game, to discuss the contract. This is my private space. Kang Dee's intrusion is the crime here." It was a bold, desperate lie. Kang Dee laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Then what is that?" He pointed to the corner of the leather ledger, visible beneath the bed skirt. Seok Jung's gaze followed his finger. The temperature in the room dropped to absolute zero. Seok Jung walked forward slowly and knelt. He pulled the ledger out. He did not open it. He simply held it, his knuckles white. He looked up first at Isla, then at his son. The disappointment in his face was more terrifying than any rage. "You took this from my study." June said nothing. His silence was confirmation. Seok Jung stood. "You understand what this book contains. The names, the transactions, the lives. You understand that taking it is not theft. It is a declaration of war against your own family, against me." His voice was still soft, which made it all the more horrifying. June found his voice thin but steady. "It's over, father. The fighting, the gambling, the threats. We're leaving. You will let us leave." Seok June tilted his head as if considering a curious insect. "And why would I do that?" "Because," June said, drawing a phone from his pocket, "the digital copy is already gone. Sent to a place you cannot reach. If we are not on a flight out of the country by dawn, with guarantees for Isla's mother's safety, it goes to the National Police Agency. The Financial Intelligence Unit. Every name in that book becomes public." It was a standoff. The hall was packed now with the poker guests, watching the internal collapse of a syndicate dynasty. Seok Jung's face underwent a subtle, terrible transformation. The gentle mask dissolved, revealing the ruthless architect beneath. He nodded, almost to himself. "You learned strategy from me, after all. A pity you chose to use it for sentiment." He handed the ledger to a stunned Kang Dee. "Secure this." Then he addressed the room, his voice regaining its calm command. "A family matter, nothing more. Please enjoy the rest of the night." The guests, understanding the dismissal, began to shuffle away, whispers exploding among them. Seok Jung turned his back on his son and Isla. "You have until dawn," he said without looking back. "The plane will be at Gimpo, Private Hangar 7. Your mother will remain under our care as a guest until the ledger is retrieved and destroyed. A clean exchange." He walked away, leaving them standing in the wreckage of the door. It was not freedom. It was a hostage swap. Their escape for the ledger, Isla's mother for their silence. They left the Hanok with nothing but the clothes they wore and June's phone. A car, one of June, was waiting. They drove in silence toward the city, toward the airport, the ledger's digital copy their only leverage. But as the city lights glittered below them, June spoke. "He won't let her go. You know that, right? My father doesn't make exchanges, he makes examples." Isla stared out the window. "I know, so what's the real plan?" June's hands tightened on the wheel. "The ledger has a page, the last page. I didn't have time to tell you. It's not just our names. It's the name of the prosecutor who has been on my father's payroll for 15 years. The man who has buried every investigation. If that page becomes public, that prosecutor falls, and he will turn on my father to save himself. It's a mutually assured destruction. We don't give him the book. We give him a choice." It was a risk of unimaginable scale. They were going to blackmail a blackmailer, using a corrupt official as the bomb. They pulled over in a quiet side street in Mapogu. Using a public internet cafe, June composed an email. He attached a single clear photo of the ledger's last page, showing the prosecutor's name, bank account numbers, and amounts received. He addressed it to 3 entities: the prosecutor's office, internal affairs, a major newspaper, and the prosecutor's personal, private email. The message was simple: Kim Seok-jung has lost control of his assets. This copy is one of many. Stand down or you stand next to him in court. He set the email on a 12-hour delay. If they did not deactivate it from their new location, it would send. It was their dead man's switch. They arrived at Gimpo just after 4 a.m. The private hangar was quiet. A small jet waited, its stairs down. But standing on the tarmac, under the harsh hangar lights, were not just crew members. Kang-di was there with 4 men, and beside him, held gently by the arm by Mrs. Choi, was Isla's mother, Eunice, looking confused and frail in a wheelchair. The swap was happening, but not as negotiated. The atmosphere was taut as a wire. June and Isla walked forward, empty-handed. Where is it? Kang-di demanded. June held up the phone with the delayed email screen. It's in the cloud. We board the plane with her, we land in Osaka, and you get the access codes. No codes, no ledger, it goes public. Kang-di's smile was thin. Your father anticipated your creativity. He has a counteroffer. He gestured to one of his men who opened a briefcase. It was filled with bundled cash and 2 new passports. You take these, you get on the plane, you leave. Kang-di nodded to Isla's mother, stays, a permanent guest, a guarantee of your continued silence. Forever. Isla felt the world tilt. This was the true trap, a life of looking over their shoulder with her mother a perpetual prisoner. June looked at her, his eyes asking the question. Isla looked at her mother's frightened face, then back at the ledger's power on the phone. There was a third option, one they hadn't planned. She stepped forward toward Kang-di, her hands open. I want to speak to Seok-jung, now, on the phone. Or the email sends in. She glanced at June's phone, 11 hours and 42 minutes. Kang-di, surprised, pulled out his own phone and made a call. He handed it to her. Isla's voice was clear, carried on the cold dawn air. You have the ledger, you have your empire, you have your son's obedience. You've won, all we want is to disappear. Let my mother go, we will vanish. You will never hear from us again. The email will be cancelled. But if you keep her, you are not securing your future. You are admitting that the 2 biggest threats to your kingdom are a retired janitor from London and a woman you already beat. What does that say about your strength? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Kim Seok-jung's voice, weary and sharp, you fight like your father, all flash and no finish. Put Kang-di on. Isla handed the phone back. Kang-di listened, his expression growing darker and more frustrated. He finally snarled, yes, sir, and hung up. He glared at them with pure, undiluted hatred. Get on the plane, all of you, now. It was not mercy, it was a calculation. Letting them go was less risky than creating martyrs or triggering a scandal. They helped Isla's mother onto the jet. As the engines whined to life, Isla looked out the window. Kang-di stood on the tarmac, watching them, a promise of future violence in his stance. They were free, but they were marked. The email was cancelled as they crossed into Japanese airspace. The digital copy of the ledger, however, remained, stored in a digital lockbox only they could access. A ghost in the machine of the Jumho. They landed in Osaka, but they did not stay. Using the cash, they bought tickets under their new names to Vancouver, a city of rain and distance. For the first month, they lived in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It did not come. The syndicate, it seemed, had accepted the costly piece. June found work as a martial arts instructor at a community center, a world away from the cellar ring. Isla's mother, Eunice, began to regain her strength, though the confusion of her ordeal never fully left her. And Isla, for the first time since she was a child, tried to build a life that wasn't framed by survival. But the past is a ghost with sharp teeth. One rainy afternoon, 6 months after their escape, a manila envelope arrived at their modest apartment. There was no return address. Inside was a single, glossy photograph. It was a recent picture of Kang-di lying in a hospital bed, his face a swollen mass of bruises, his arm in a cast. Written on the back in elegant Hangul was a message. A house cleans its own mess. The debt is settled. Do not look back. It was Seok-jung's final word. Kang-di's rebellion had been punished. The balance was restored. The ledger's threat had worked. June burned the photograph, but that night he showed Isla something else, a news article on his laptop from a Seoul financial paper. The prominent prosecutor whose name was on the last page of the ledger had announced an unexpected early retirement, citing health reasons. The system had quietly consumed its own corruption. The Jumho lived on, but its protective armor had a permanent crack. They had won, not a clean victory, but a breathing space, a life. Yet as Isla lay awake listening to the Vancouver rain, the face of her father in that photograph floated behind her eyes. The ledger had bought their freedom, but it had also handed her a key to a different prison, the truth about where she came from. And across the world, in a healed body and a quiet mind, Kim June carried a different knowledge, that he had finally broken something his father could not repair. They were out. But they would never be the same. And the world they left behind was now watching, its memory long, and its hunger for revenge only sleeping. The rain in Vancouver became the rhythm of their new life, a constant wash trying to cleanse the old stains. For a year, they moved through the grey coastal city like ghosts in a pleasant dream. June taught children's martial arts classes, his stern patience a hit with parents. Isla worked as a physiotherapist at a sports clinic, her hands now healing instead of hurting. Her mother, Eunice, planted a small herb garden on their apartment balcony, humming songs Isla hadn't heard since childhood. They were safe, comfortable, and utterly haunted. The silence from Seoul was a presence in every room. The unspoken questions about Isla's father lay between them like a sleeping animal, best left undisturbed. They had built a pier on a foundation of shared secrets, and some days, the whole structure seemed to sway. The peace was an illusion they both worked to maintain. June would wake sometimes in the night, his body rigid, listening for sounds that didn't exist in their quiet neighborhood. Isla would catch herself analyzing the posture of strangers on the street, their balance, their potential threat. They were fighters in a world that had no ring. The past was a ghost, and it demanded to be fed. The hunger finally found its voice through Eunice. Her memory, once clouded by medication and trauma, began to clear in the calm stability. One evening over dinner, she looked at Isla and said, quite clearly, he always said he was in textiles, but his hands never had the smell of dye. They smelled of the sea and of fear. It was the first time she had spoken of Richard Vance in years. The dam broke slowly, then all at once. Memories trickled out over weeks. A phone call he'd taken in the night, shouting in a language she didn't know. A suitcase of cash he'd hidden, then taken when he left. A man with a gentle face and hard eyes who'd visited once. A man she now recognized from the ledger photograph as a young Kim Seok-jun. The story that emerged was not of a man who abandoned his family, but of a man who was swallowed by a deal he couldn't escape. He hadn't run from them. He had run to lead the danger away, and he had failed. Isla became obsessed. The digital copy of the ledger, their ghost in the machine, became her map. With June's hesitant help, she cross-referenced the entries from 20-plus years ago. She found the trail of the asterisk Morning Star asterisk. She found the Birmingham connection, not a city, but a code name for a series of arms shipments from Eastern Europe, disguised as textile machinery. Her father hadn't just been a smuggler, he had been a logistician, a fixer who knew how to move sensitive cargo across borders. And according to a footnote in the ledger, his final job went wrong. A container was intercepted by UK customs in Felixstowe. Richard Vance vanished the same week. The Jumhopar listed the loss as substantial. They had written him off as dead or a defector, but there was no body, no proof. June watched her search with growing unease. We have a life, Isla, we are safe. Digging this up, it's calling the wolf back to the door. But Isla couldn't stop. It wasn't about finding a father. It was about solving an equation that had defined her life, the reason for the lack, the source of the struggle. She needed to know if he was a coward or a casualty. The search became her own private fight ring. It led her to a retired customs officer living in a cottage in Wales, a man named Gareth Pritchard. A series of encrypted emails, paid for with a slice of their remaining cash, secured a video call. The old man's face was wary on the screen. The Felixstowe incident, I remember, nasty business. We were told to stand down by orders from high up. Political, they said. The container was released, but he wasn't in it. He was the one who tipped us off. He wanted out. He was trying to burn the shipment to break his contract. Pritchard leaned closer to his camera. They found him, or someone did. A week later, a body washed up in the Thames. No ID, cause of death inconclusive, but the word in certain circles was that it was a message from a Korean partnership. A clean exit, but a permanent one. Isla ended the call, her hands numb. Her father had tried to do the right thing, the brave thing at the end. He had died for it. The man she'd hated for 2 decades was not the villain. He was another victim of the same machine that had nearly consumed her. The revelation was not a relief. It was a devastating rearrangement of her entire history. She had built her strength on the foundation of his betrayal. Now that foundation was gone, replaced by a tragic echo. She told June that night, the rain streaking the windows. He listened, and then he said the only thing that mattered. Then you're not his ghost, you're his finish. You got out. You broke the chain he couldn't. This should have been the end. The final loop closed, but the world has a way of weaving threads back together. 18 months after their arrival, a Korean business magazine arrived at the community center, addressed to June under his old name. Inside was a profile on the modernization of certain traditional family enterprises. It featured a photograph of Kim Seok-jung, looking older, grayer, standing beside the new CEO of a legitimate venture capital firm, his daughter, Kim Jae-ah, June's younger sister by 10 years. The article spoke of succession of new directions. There was no mention of a son. June was erased. It was the ultimate punishment and the ultimate gift. He was dead to that world. He stared at his sister's face, composed and fierce, and felt a sorrow deeper than any physical wound. She was in the cage now. He had escaped, but his escape had consigned her. This precipitated the crisis they had been avoiding. The quiet life in Vancouver was a beautiful lie. They were living in the shadow of a world that still turned, affecting people they loved. June fell into a quiet depression. Isla, armed with the truth about her father, felt a new, restless energy. They were not just survivors. They were loaded weapons on a shelf, and a weapon's purpose is to be used. The decision, when it came, was not dramatic. It was over washed dishes. June said, "I can't teach 5-year-olds to block while my sister learns to parry boardroom knives." Isla said, "I can't rebuild shoulders for weekend warriors while the people who ordered my father's death call it business." They weren't going back to Seoul. That was suicide. But they couldn't stay here, playing house while the house was still on fire. They had one weapon left, the ledger, not as blackmail but as a key. They crafted a new plan, one with no violence, no theft, a piece of judo. Using secure channels, June made contact with his sister. A single message: "The ledger is digital. It has a page with Prosecutor Kim's name. That page is gone. The rest is yours if you want it. Use it to clean the house, not to burn it down." He attached a single, non-incriminating page as proof of access. The gamble was immense. Jaya could be her father's creature. She could use the information to consolidate power in the old ways, or she could be the change the article suggested. Weeks of silence followed. Then a reply arrived, routed through 3 anonymous servers. "The house is being cleaned. The ledger would be a hazardous contaminant. Destroy it. But a list of assets to be divested would be useful for charitable redistribution." It was a masterpiece of ambiguity. She was asking for the non-criminal assets, the legitimate businesses, the properties that could be sold off, the profits potentially used for something else. She was asking for the keys to the kingdom's treasury, not its dungeon. It was a partnership proposal. Isla and June spent months compiling that list, separating the clean money from the dirty. They sent it. They received no thanks. But 6 months later, a financial news brief reported the sale of a large Seoul commercial building owned by a Hansung Group subsidiary. The buyer was a consortium. The proceeds were donated to a network of shelters for women and a fund for retired boxers with medical debt. June and Isla sat at their kitchen table and read the article, then read it again. It was a signature. It was his sister's first move. The war was not over, but it had changed battlegrounds. This is where their story truly begins, not with a knockout, but with a negotiation, not with an escape, but with a return of sorts. They didn't go back to Korea. They didn't need to. They had become a remote node of pressure, a conscience with leverage. They used their knowledge, their skills, differently. June began consulting online for security firms, teaching them to recognize the patterns of organized crime infiltration. Isla started a self-defense program specifically for women in vulnerable industries, funded by anonymous grants that traced back to Seoul. The final surprise came on the 3rd anniversary of the fight in the cellar. A package arrived with no postmark, left at their door. Inside was a pair of pink sneakers, child-sized, blinking with tiny LED lights, and a note in handwriting they both recognized as Mrs. Choi, though it was unsigned. "For the child you may have one day, so she may walk a brighter path. The garden gate is unlocked." It was not a threat. It was a blessing and a reminder. The East Garden, where Isla had left Zara in the original story, was a symbol of safe haven. By sending this, the old world was acknowledging their new life and even wishing it well. The syndicate had not forgiven, but it had, in its own way, yielded. Kim June and Isla Vance did not get a fairy tale. They got something harder and more real, a truce, a life built not on the ruins of the past, but alongside it. They married in a small city hall ceremony with only Eunice and two friends from the community center as witnesses. The dragon of Dongdaemun was gone. In his place was a man who could finally look in the mirror without flinching. The woman who broke his streak no longer fought to survive, but to build. The money from the original bet, the $200,000, was finally used. They bought a small gym in East Vancouver. They called it the Foundry, a place where things and people could be remade. The mystery of the 42-second kick that started it all was solved, but not in the way anyone expected. It wasn't a fluke or a setup. It was the collision of two people who were already living lies, and in that impact, they shattered the false selves they were forced to wear. The win was real. The loss was real. The respect that grew from it was the only thing that wasn't a deception. In the end, the most underground thing of all wasn't the fight ring. It was the fragile, defiant thing they built together in the light. So what does it mean to win? For 27 fights, Kim June believed it meant standing alone at the top. For Isla Vance, it meant surviving long enough to save her mother. The cellar ring measured victory in seconds, in broken bones, in money changing hands in the dark. But the truest victory they found couldn't be scored on any judge's card. It was the quiet, daily work of building something real from the wreckage of what was fake. It was choosing a small gym over a criminal empire. It was healing instead of harming. It was turning a weapon of blackmail into a tool for charity. Their story is a testament to a different kind of strength, not the explosive, showy power of a knockout punch, but the resilient, patient strength of a truce, of a peace negotiated from a position of hard-won leverage. They didn't destroy the dragon's lair. They simply walked out of the cave and built a home where the light could reach. And in doing so, they proved that the most powerful blow isn't the one that ends a fight. It's the one that ends a cycle. The legacy of that single kick in Dongdaemun isn't a championship belt gathering dust. It's a foundation, a place called the Foundry where others can reshape their own lives. It's a sister in soul quietly redirecting a fortune towards shelters. It's a pair of blinking pink sneakers in a box, a message that the path can be brighter for the next generation. Sometimes winning is not about conquest, it's about conversion, turning your pain into purpose, your survival into a sanctuary for others. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever fought your way out of a cage someone else built, tell us about it in the comments. Share a moment where you found an unexpected ally or turned a loss into a different kind of beginning. This community is built on stories of resilience, and yours matters. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story about people who redefine what it means to be strong, because everyone has a fight, but not everyone has to fight alone. Thank you for watching. Until next time.